Carter, the floor is yours.
Item 16.
And by the way, this is for till Eastern item only.
My presentation? It's the bond. Okay, well, I'll go through verbally, I guess. I'm not sure why we don't have the presentation. We do. Okay. So, as mentioned, this is a Foothill Eastern only item, and really what it is it's an opportunity to reduce our debt payments significantly throughout the life of the bonds without without extending any of the maturity dates. And so, what we are looking at here is that rather than waiting until the call date on some of our bonds, which is 2024, we can do a bond refunding by issuing taxable municipal bonds. And the reason that we can do this is that rates have decreased significantly, as you see there. And so now, typically, taxable bond rates are much higher than tax-exempt bond rates. And so it wouldn't make financial sense for us to be able to do this, but this has created a unique opportunity. And you may have heard of a lot of other entities taking advantage of this right now, and they're out in the market doing the same thing. So what we have here before you today is we're looking at our 2049 and 2053 maturities, which are at 6%. And so by issuing these new bonds in the 4% range, we can save a lot by reducing our interest payments every year. We also, have these other bonds here that I've listed at the bottom that are callable as well in 2024 or some in 2022. And it is still the goal of the board, I believe, to pay down some bonds when they're callable. This does not prohibit us from doing that. In fact, it would enhance it, in my opinion, by creating additional cash flow. And so, once again, what this does is it reduces our payments every year, does not extend any bond maturity dates. It would improve our debt service coverage, which helps us with our credit ratings, which then will translate into lower cost refundings in the future. And also, we would put a 10-year call 10-year call on these bonds to make sure that we retain that flexibility when we have another opportunity to refund them again for savings. And so what I'm showing you here is two scenarios. One is if we don't contribute any cash, we're looking at reducing our payments over the life of the bonds by $140 million, which translates into a present value savings of 12.9%. What we have before you today is that anything above 3% is something that we would consider doing. And so we're really in a good range here right now to try to get into the market. And if we can capture these rates, we would have significant savings. The other alternative here is if we contribute $75 million of cash, then after getting back our $75 million, that $140 million in reduced interest payments becomes $206 million. And so really the two items here for you today. And if we were to contribute the cash, basically that's where I just show you that we would pay ourselves back in the first 7 years with the $75 million and then realize the additional decrease in our payments and cash flow savings of $206 million after that. We also, of course, there's always fees included in any bond transaction. Those are already in the numbers that I showed you. So the savings are net of the fees. The majority of these fees are contingent upon us completing the transaction. The ones that are not are bond counsel and disclosure counsel. We were able to reduce those costs greatly because we had just done the term rate bond transaction, which a lot of the disclosure was already done for that. And some of the rating agency fees also would be non-contingent. So next steps is if with board approval today, we would work with the rating agencies and try to get our ratings by November. So, and also finalize the documents that you have in draft form today. And then we would begin marketing these bonds and pricing in early December and try to close before the holidays in December. That's assuming that the market is still there, because it is, as you are aware, the market is very volatile. Rates are up and down. So this is just really for the approval today would be so that we are prepared and that we could take advantage of this opportunity at the right time. And so with that, the items before you, the first item is to approve a resolution that authorizes the transaction itself and allows us to, and approves the documents that are in draft form and allows us to finalize those. The second is a budget resolution, and that is to contribute up to $75 million in cash into the transaction. And then the third is to authorize the CEO to execute a contract amendment with our financial advisors, PFM. We have a contract with them currently, but whenever we do a bond transaction, we need an amendment for that. And so those are the items before you today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Potter. This is Foothill Eastern only. Any discussions or questions?
I actually have some comments.
Director
One
Scott
of my
Boyce is
concerns
recognized.
is that, every time that we put extension on these bonds, there will be no extension on these bonds, so they'll be
No.
locked in at the present.
No change in dates, any of the maturity
payoff
dates. So
dates are
everything,
still the
all
same?
we're doing essentially is decreasing the payments.
Thank
It's
you
for
so much.
savings.
Okay, I'm good.
Director Ferguson?
I just want to make a comment, a compliment to Ms. Potter, because I think this is extremely fiscally responsible, and to save 200, potentially 206 million over the life of the bonds is really good fiscal prudence for the taxpayers. So thank you.
On behalf of Foothill, I'll move the item.
It was moved by
I'll
Director
second.
of the questions.
Oh, yeah, I have a number of questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Chapin.
Yes, I just got on top of this week and read the report. I don't know what the assumptions are for interest rates and what result of that. I have not had the chance yet to do my own market survey to see how this all jives. I believe we're in a time of where we're not risking rate increases. If anything, it would seem like we may see something lower. I started reviewing the documents. Some things are good. In the indenture, principal interest on the Series 2019 A bonds, we have any coin or currency in the United States and not Bitcoin. I think that's good. Then there's also, these are senior lien bonds. Can you explain that? We have other bonds outstanding. What does that do to any other maturities and bonds we have outstanding?
So we'll be replacing senior lien bonds with other senior lien bonds. The only junior lien bonds we have for Foothill Eastern are 198 million, and those are the ones that I'm actually targeting paying off potentially when they become callable in 2024. So all of our bonds, the majority of our bonds are senior lien.
Yeah, then what I was really looking for, I found back in the escrow agreement where it commits the money to pay off the 2013 bonds. And I had to dig for that. I didn't read much in between.
And that's because this is an advance refunding, and so rather
Right.
than
No,
waiting
I
until the
understand
call
that.
date.
But I did have some concerns because I didn't know your assumptions in arriving at the data. And so is there some assumption of what the interest rate would be on
So
the
what
bond issue?
so what I showed you today, it was about 4.2%. Rates have moved a little. They go up and down. They went up a little and they came back down a little bit. So we don't know exactly what that will be when we go to market, but we're assuming that it's something in that range. And the authorization would not allow me to execute a transaction with a present value savings of less than 3%. So we would. But rates will change. They're going to either go up, which means we save less, or they'll go down, which means we save more.
At what point would you not want to do the transaction if the rates go higher?
If we have a present value savings of less than 3%.
Less than 3%.
Mm-hmm.
So you're comfortable at the 13%? Is that what the projection is?
That's extremely good savings, yes.
Okay. And then I was a little concerned because we have 2 bond issues outstanding, which this will do, actually doubling the amount of bonds. We're paying interest on both at the same time and to a point in time.
Well,
is that correct?
So when we put them into the escrow account, it's an in-substance defeasance. They come off of our books, and the savings that I showed you is net of all of that. So it is true that with an advanced refunding, we can start saving now by putting the proceeds of the new bonds we issue into an escrow account that pays the interest on the bonds that we're refunding, the 2013 bonds, through the call date of 2024, and then pays them off in 2024. But overall, since we're issuing bonds at a much lower rate than those 6% bonds, overall, there's a decrease in our payments every year beginning from today, rather than having to wait until 2024 to try to refund them.
Well, isn't that, though, true because the interest on the new bond issue is included in advance in the escrow? In other words, there is an interest payment
On the old bonds. So the existing bonds that we have, the $820 million that I'm proposing to refund at, because they're at a higher rate, 6%.
Right.
So we will basically pay those off by issuing these new bonds at a lower rate.
But not until 2024.
They'll be paid off in 2024, but through an escrow. So they come off of our books because we're putting safe investments, treasuries into this escrow account to cover all of the payments.
But interest is still due and payable on both issues.
Right, but it's less. So what happens is the numbers that I showed you here with the savings are net of all of those prepaid interest amounts that you need to put in the escrow account along with the proceeds to pay off those bonds in 2024. So it's because it's 6% versus 4 point something. So you save. So even though you have to put the prepaid interest for the bonds that we're paying off into an escrow account, we're saving so much by decreasing the payments, and we get to realize that immediately that it's an overall savings.
I don't understand that math.
Do you want
how
help?
you have double the amount of bonds outstanding and that you're saving interest.
The bonds outstanding, it's different. As Amy had said, once we deposit money into the escrow, the bonds that are the 13A, 49, and 53 maturities that are outstanding will no longer be outstanding.
But they have to have the interest paid even though they're not
They
outstanding.
will need, yes, we will be funding the interest payable on those bonds through the call date in the escrow and from the refunding issue, including the cash that's deposited. So the proceeds plus the cash is going to be a sufficient amount to put in an escrow, enough to pay the interest through 2024 and then call the bonds.
Well, I understand that, but so you're putting enough in escrow to not only pay the interest on the bonds due in 2024, but also on the new issue.
The
So
escrow
funding
won't
that
pay the escrow
twice.
doesn't pay the money or the interest on the new issue. The agency would pay that money because that will be the new outstanding bonds. The differential between the two and the cost of depositing the money in escrow, and we've made a very conservative assumption about escrow investments. The goal is to enhance those escrow investments as we've done in a number of transactions around the country. Those costs are all assumed in the savings numbers that we've shown you. So the $100+ million, the $206 million are all net of those costs, net of the deposit, net of paying the interest on the old bonds, calling the old bonds in 2024. So all that is in the numbers.
Okay, well, I'd kind of like to see that laid out on the mathematical page. I still don't accept that. That's
That's fine.
the bonds, the 2024 bonds, we're putting in advance money into an escrow to pay that, so there is an interest payment there.
Sure. Yes.
And then we're paying the interest on the new bonds out of our cash flow on an ongoing basis.
Right.
Is that
And
correct?
that's the differential
This is the
in cost.
differential.
Okay, so but it's 4 plus 6 until we reach 2024.
It's the money deposited in the escrow is also earning interest.
How much?
So it's the interest. I think we're assuming 150 right
1%?
now or something like that.
Well, see, it never
But-
quite gets up there.
Well, it's
No,
just,
it's not gonna.
a function of the fact that we're replacing 6% bonds with 4% bonds, so mathematically it all works out.
Well, I know after 2024, it makes great sense, because you paid off the one issue.
It works overall, actually, and that's what this is showing here.
To 2050, yeah, but
Yeah, these are the transactions that everyone is doing across the country, so as not to bet on where interest rates might be at the particular call dates. So when they have the bird in hand, the savings in hand, knowing that they are financing interest on the old bonds through an escrow. Same
I-
structure.
I
So let me
appreciate
say
that.
one.
Our benefits,
Let me say it one more way. So after this all happens, so if this were to go through and say it were these rates and what I'm showing you here today, is that next year's budget, well, let's say the 2021 budget. So starting that next year, you're going to see in your budget 11 million less in payments that we need to make on our bonds. And that's the structure here, is how that's showing you the savings every year. So even though we put money into an escrow that's going to cover all that, there was so much savings in replacing 6% bonds with 4% bonds and we were able to then match the current maturities we have today. So like we said, no extension of any maturity dates. So you can see there that in the back end, the savings is less, but it's fine. It's like we were able to keep all of that savings up front. And so we're actually reducing our payments, and that's what you would see like in your budgets when you approve it the next year, is $11 million a year less through 2043, and then it's very small after that it's less.
I get all that, but to me that's illusory, because you have that savings there, but you still had to make payment on both issues. Well, yes, you do, because you do one payment through the escrow,
No, you don't.
right? Haven't you funded that in the escrow?
That's incorrect. You've made your payments on the outstanding bonds that are being refunded through the escrow.
That's right. I just said that.
Through the escrow. So those payments are accounted for in these numbers. So there's no double payment. The payments that the agency is making on their debt service are lower by these amounts every year, according to the current estimates that we have for interest rates.
Well, to me that's smoke and mirrors, but
Could I maybe
It's
ask a quick question? Okay,
Chair
just,
Christina Shea, final question.
sure. Just a quick for clarity, because I think Amy, you're getting to the point. So every year, by refunding these bonds, or basically they're not refinanced, but basically we could think about it like that. We're paying off these present bonds, but we still owe the interest, right?
But
Is
it's
that correct?
no longer on our books. We put it
Right,
into
I
an
understand.
escrow.
I understand
Right.
that, but the
Yes.
bonds are paid off, and now we have new ones.
Right.
And every year we're saving 11 million
Right.
on the interest payment and the bonds that we have to pay every year.
Right.
So in the escrow account for the next 4 years, give us a dollar figure of what that interest would be. So I think that
I think
would
it was
help.
about 60 some million.
Is that
66
over
million
4
total.
years?
Yeah, over the 4 years.
So we would owe $60 million.
But it's
on
put in
interest.
there up front, right?
Right, and it would be making a little bit of interest, but not a lot. But
Sure.
you're saying that over the course of the 4 years, getting the extra 11 million, right?
Yes.
But you're only getting up to 44 million 4 years later. So how do you make up the differential of the interest that's owed for the 60 million in 4 years compared to the increase or the extra we'll have, which is 11 million per year? Am I getting that right? That's what I think may be the confusion. Is that correct? So we have an additional 11 million with this refinance, right, each year? Which at the
So
end of
our
4
overall
years would be
payments will
44
drop,
million,
And we
right?
don't have to worry anymore about the old bonds, because they're,
But the bonds are paid off, but you still have an overhead of 60 million in
no,
the escrow
we don't.
account.
We don't, because we take the proceeds, we put everything that's needed into that escrow that comes off of our books. It's not our responsibility because it's with very safe.
So you're putting the additional, right at
interest.
the time of
Right.
refinance of the 60 million into escrow.
Correct.
Okay, so that's already the extra money we've got.
Yes.
On top of that extra money, with still making interest, we have 11 million additional every year we're getting on the other side.
Yes.
So that's what I think how we need to explain it.
well, I still see it differently. The 11 million that we're paying is net after we have paid off the interest on the new issue. That's the differential that we would have paid in budget purposes between the 6% and the assumed 4%. But you've still paid the 4%. And you've also paid the 60 million in advance, yes, through the escrow. And so it's one plus the other, 1 plus 2. And that's where I'm coming from. And so to me, that's an illusory savings, because you're paying interest on both issues until the other one is paid off. One is pre-funded through the additional money that this new bond issue is providing. The part of that is for interest payments.
I think if you look at it more simplistically, that it is a complete replacement of the outstanding obligation you have on those two maturities, the 2049 and the 2053 maturities. So what you're doing, you are financing what it costs to pay those in full, interest and principal, until the call date, and substituting that debt with this new debt, which is about $11 or $12 million less per year.
Right now.
Well, that is still illusory because you've already paid in advance for the other interest cost, and you're not accounting for that. It's
No.
off your budget sheet, yes,
No, you are accounting for it in the financing.
Yes.
in your budget.
And it's because it's so much lower, the new bonds are so much
No,
lower.
I understand all that, but it's what I'm also concerned about all the millions in fees that are contingent upon the transaction happening. So it's not a pressure to make it happen, whether or not it's advisable. So I am inclined to, I like the idea of the savings. I understand that a lot, but there really are two separate interest payments going on until 2024.
The numbers are all net of all the costs, fees, for the escrow, they're all net of that.
In the interest of time, I mean, this item should have been discussed more during the Investment and Finance Committee. With all due respect, Supervisor Chafee, your points are well taken, but at this juncture, we have a motion that on the floor for Foothill Eastern only, which was presented by Director Chuck Puckett. Do I see a second? It was seconded by Director Lucille Crane. We're gonna go for the vote, but please fast.
Quick question. So right now, we're looking at a 13% savings, correct?
Right.
And you said you'd be okay with down to a 3%.
Mm-hmm.
How are we gonna determine when you're gonna pull the trigger on this? I mean, I don't know if at 3% we would actually have made this one, because the dollars may not make sense to us. I don't know if the dollar amount is 3% that we would save. But again, I don't know.
PB, 25.
Net of all the fees and everything.
So how do we, is there a way that we could put like a, if you don't get this savings, you don't go? I don't know. I mean,
Well, that's, the parameters right
right now,
now
we've
are
got a
at
10%
3%.
swing here, that's pretty.
Right,
good.
right.
Yeah.
So it's something, it would, right, it would, you could change the parameters rather than the resolution right now, which is 3%.
Okay. I'm not sure where my number is right now. It's just something I thought about.
Hard to
so.
do it on the fly. I think
It's
3%
hard to
seems
do.
pretty
How much,
hefty.
how much would you
All
like?
right. Okay, well, there's a motion and it was seconded. All in favor on behalf of Foothill Eastern, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, with abstaining of Supervisor Chafee. All right, I don't see any other requests to speak forms for the second portion of public comments. Now we're moving to